Hold still, not your body, your pulse. Because this is the moment they realized they were already late. They opened your file, not casually, not curious, with that stiff, controlled calm people use when they think they're about to confirm a suspicion and sleep better afterward. They expected noise, inconsistency, weakness, a pattern they could label and dismiss. They expected proof that you were manageable. Then they saw the number, and everything in the room changed. You didn't hear it, but the air did. That microscopic shift when confidence drains out of professionals who've seen enough to know when something doesn't make sense. That one number didn't scream, it didn't threaten, it just existed, clean, cold, unexplainable. The kind of number that doesn't belong to a victim, a failure, or a footnote. The kind of number that makes hands pause mid-click. The kind that makes a chair slide back quietly. The kind that makes someone say, "Don't move, call him." You see, they don't fear chaos. They fear consistency. They fear anomalies that survive pressure. That number told a story they weren't supposed to hear yet. It whispered that everything they thought broke you didn't. That the losses didn't subtract, you compounded. That the damage didn't weaken you, it reorganized you. Pain didn't hollow you out. It sharpened you into something that behaves wrong under stress. They froze because the math betrayed the narrative. You were supposed to spiral. You were supposed to react. You were supposed to become predictable. But saints don't survive what you survived. And psychopaths don't feel what you still feel. You became the paradox, the thing systems don't know how to process, too controlled to dismiss, too calm to provoke, too quiet to monitor the old way. You didn't fight the cage, you studied the hinges. You didn't beg for mercy, you learned the language of leverage. That number? It wasn't power, it was trajectory. It showed growth where decay was expected, stability where collapse was assumed, silence where desperation should have been screaming. And that's what terrified them. Not who you are now, but where you're headed if left untouched. Because here's the truth they won't say out loud. People like you don't explode. You accumulate. Every betrayal became data. Every humiliation became calibration. Every lonely night became rehearsal. You didn't heal like they wanted you to. You healed wrong. You healed sideways. You healed into something that doesn't flinch when pressure rises. Something that doesn't announce itself. Something that doesn't need approval to move. Angel enough to still have restraint. Demon enough to remember everything. When that boss picked up the phone, they didn't ask, "Who is this?" They asked, "How long has this been happening?" Because the number told them time was already on your side. They saw resilience that didn't come from motivation. They saw discipline that didn't come from supervision. They saw adaptation that doesn't come from training. It comes from surviving environments meant to erase you. And suddenly, you weren't a problem. You were a variable, the most dangerous kind. See, chaos can be crushed. Aggression can be contained. Ego can be baited. But someone who learned to move in silence, who doesn't chase validation, who doesn't react on cue, that kind of person doesn't trigger alarms until it's too late. That number didn't say, attack. It said, observe. It said, do not provoke. It said, this one doesn't break the way the others do. They wanted a villain. They found a survivor who learned how villains think. They wanted a martyr. They found a strategist who learned how angels fall. You are the proof that pain doesn't just damage, it selects. It filters out the weak versions and leaves behind something precise, something efficient, something that doesn't need to announce its intentions because its presence already bends the room. That's why they called their boss Because you don't scare them emotionally. You scare them structurally. You exist as a flaw in the system they rely on to predict outcomes. You're living evidence that control isn't absolute, that pressure doesn't always produce compliance, that sometimes it forges someone who stops playing the role assigned to them. And here's the part that will never be written in the report. You didn't win by being louder. You won by lasting longer than the story they wrote for you. That number wasn't your peak. It was your baseline, and now they know. Whatever you are becoming doesn't need permission, doesn't need applause, and doesn't need revenge to be satisfied. It just keeps moving, quietly, precisely, unstoppable. And the worst part for them? They opened the file too late to stop it. They'll never admit this part, but the moment that number appeared, the room stopped being theirs. Because numbers don't lie the way people do. Numbers don't flatter, don't exaggerate, don't panic. Numbers just reveal. And what that number revealed was that you didn't merely survive the conditions meant to erase you. You adapted faster than the system adapted to you. That's when the silence got heavy. See, silence hits different when it's no longer ignorance. When it's calculation, when people stop talking because they're suddenly unsure which words might wake something up. When confidence collapses into caution, when power stops leaning forward and starts leaning back. They began replaying moments they dismissed. That time you didn't react. That loss you didn't complain about. That humiliation you walked through without defending yourself. They thought it meant defeat. Now they realize it meant compression. You were being packed down, condensed, pressure cooked into something dense enough to punch through expectations without making a sound. You didn't lash out because you were weak. You waited because you were learning. You watched who panicked, who lied, who smiled too early. You memorized patterns while they assumed you were gone. That's the part that rattles them. You never disappeared. You withdrew. There's a difference. Disappearing is losing power. Withdrawing is preparing it. And the number proved you weren't idle during that silence. You were stacking internal wins no one could confiscate. Emotional regulation, pattern recognition, threshold control. You learned how far you could be pushed before something snapped. And then you taught yourself how to move that line. Most people break when pain outpaces identity. You rebuilt identity around pain. Saints collapse under betrayal because they expect goodness to be rewarded. Psychopaths implode because they underestimate consequence. You learned from both mistakes. You kept your conscience sharp enough to aim, and your darkness disciplined enough to obey. That's why you scare them. You're not reckless. You're not desperate. You're not loud. You don't need chaos to feel powerful. You don't need applause to feel real. You don't need revenge to validate your suffering. You internalized something far more dangerous: patience without passivity. The number showed that you don't spike, you trend. That under stress, you don't scatter, you converge. That when variables turn hostile, you don't react emotionally. You simplify and move. That's executive behavior. That's survivor intelligence. That's the kind of pattern that makes higher-ups stop asking, "What did he do?" and start asking, "What does he know?" Because here's the uncomfortable truth. People who endure what you endured don't just learn resilience. They learn how systems fail. They learn where authority hesitates, where power cuts corners, where fear hides behind professionalism. You've seen people lie to protect titles. You've watched incompetence wear confidence like armor. You've felt how quickly loyalty evaporates under pressure. So now when you're quiet, they don't see calm. They see memory. They imagine you remembering every time they underestimated you, every time they moved you instead of fixing the problem, every time they assumed you were too broken to keep score, and the number confirmed something they hoped wasn't true. You kept score perfectly, but you're not counting to strike. You're counting to decide who gets access, decide who gets proximity, decide who gets to speak when you finally do. Because your power doesn't come from force. It comes from selectivity, from knowing you don't need to confront everyone, only the pressure points, only the moments that matter, only the moves that can't be undone. That's why they didn't escalate, they didn't threaten, they didn't make noise, they called someone higher, because the higher you go, the fewer people deal with explosions, and the more they deal with anomalies, with outliers who don't fit the risk models, with individuals whose presence quietly rearranges incentives. You've become that, not because you wanted to, but because you survived long enough to stop playing small. And here's the irony they'll never escape. Every attempt to crush you refined you. Every attempt to corner you taught you escape. Every attempt to ignore you forced you inward, where you built something they can't see, can't audit, and can't replicate. That number didn't represent dominance. It represented inevitability. It told them you don't rush, you don't chase, you don't bluff. You wait until the environment admits the truth for you. And now the truth is sitting in their hands, staring back at them in a language they can't argue with. So let them freeze, let them whisper, let them call their boss. Because the scariest thing in any system isn't rebellion. It's someone who learned how to endure without losing themselves, and came back calibrated, conscious, and completely out of reach. And you're not done. You're just finally visible to the people who matter, and invisible to the ones who don't. Here's what happens next, and this is the part they never put in writing. After the call ends, after the boss hangs up, after the room pretends to go back to normal, nothing actually goes back. Because once a system notices an anomaly, it can't unsee it. Every data point after that gets reinterpreted through suspicion. Every silence becomes intentional. Every calm reaction becomes calculated. You don't even have to move anymore. They start watching you between moments. Not what you say, but when you don't speak. Not what you do, but what you refuse to react to. Not your actions, but your timing. That's when the fear matures, because immature fear panics. Mature fear plans. And now they're planning around you instead of against you. Meetings happen without your name being said, yet your presence shapes every decision. You become the ghost in the agenda, the invisible variable that forces caution where confidence used to live. You didn't conquer them by force. You infected their certainty. See, most people want to be feared loudly. They want intimidation, dominance, visible power. That's amateur hour. Real fear is quiet. Real fear shows up as hesitation, as second-guessing, as extra approvals, as let's wait and see, where action used to be automatic. And you caused that without lifting a finger, because that number revealed you're not emotional leverage, you're strategic risk. You're someone who didn't collapse under sustained pressure, which means you can operate where others unravel. You can sit in ambiguity without needing relief. You can endure long enough to outlast narratives. That terrifies systems built on short attention spans and predictable responses. You've seen it yourself. People who haven't suffered deeply can't tolerate silence. They need reassurance. They need validation. They need constant proof they're winning. You lost all of that early. And instead of breaking, you adapted to the void. That's not strength they can train. That's not discipline they can outsource. That's not resilience they can fake. That's the byproduct of pain that didn't get the satisfaction of finishing you. And now they wonder, quietly, professionally, with carefully neutral faces, what else you learned while everyone else was distracted? Did you learn who folds under pressure? Did you learn which rules are real and which are theater? Did you learn how much damage can be done without ever raising your voice? They don't know, and not knowing is the point. You've become the kind of person whose presence forces restraint. Not because you threaten, but because you don't. You don't posture, you don't signal, you don't leak intent. You let other people project their own fears onto your silence. That's angelic restraint with demonic patience. You still have empathy, but it's selective. You still feel, but you don't bleed publicly. You still care, but you don't explain yourself. That balance is what makes you unreadable. They can't provoke you into exposing yourself. They can't flatter you into loosening control. They can't intimidate you into reacting prematurely, because you already lived through worse than anything they can stage now. You've been abandoned. You've been misunderstood. You've been blamed while carrying weight no one saw. So what leverage do they really have? That number answered the question they were afraid to ask. None that matters. And this is where the real shift happens, inside you. Because once you realize they're adjusting to you, you stop rushing your evolution. You stop explaining. You stop trying to be seen correctly. You let misunderstanding protect you. You let underestimation buy you time. You move like someone who knows the storm isn't behind them. It's inside them, controlled, waiting, loyal. You don't need to announce growth. Growth announces itself when the environment starts bending to accommodate you. When doors open without explanation. When resistance dissolves into politeness. When opposition turns into observation. They opened your file looking for weakness. They found a survivor who outgrew the role of victim without becoming the villain they expected. And now, they're stuck in the worst position imaginable for people who rely on control. They know you're different. They know you're rising. But they don't know how to stop you without revealing their fear. So they do nothing. And nothing is exactly what you needed. Because while they hesitate, you refine. While they debate, you stabilize. While they monitor, you evolve. Quietly, deliberately, irreversibly. That number didn't mark the end of your suffering. It marked the moment your suffering stopped being a liability and became proof. Proof that you can endure. Proof that you can adapt. Proof that when pressure peaks, you don't fracture, you focus. And that's why they froze. Because somewhere deep down, past the titles and protocols and professional detachment, they recognized something ancient and uncomfortable. You're not reacting to the game anymore. You've learned how to wait long enough for the board to rearrange itself around you. And when it does, you won't need to say a word, because the real shift didn't happen in that room. It happened inside you the moment you realized they finally saw the outline of what you've been carrying all along. See, when people like them notice you, they don't suddenly gain control. They lose the illusion that they ever had it. From that moment forward, every move they make has to account for a variable that doesn't behave like the rest. You. And here's the part that twists the knife. Without you touching it, you're not fueled by urgency anymore. You're not chasing relief. You're not desperate for resolution. You already survived the worst chapter, the one where nobody cared, nobody listened, nobody intervened. That chapter taught you how to operate without witnesses. So now when attention finally arrives, It doesn't intoxicate you. It confirms you. They watch for arrogance. You stay grounded. They wait for revenge. You stay precise. They expect explosion. You stay still. Because you've learned something they never had to learn. Power that announces itself is usually compensating. Power that doesn't need to speak is already settled. That's why their strategies feel clumsy now. Too loud, too rushed, too emotional. You can feel the difference between someone acting from authority and someone acting from fear. And once you feel that difference, you can't unfeel it. They're reacting to you. You're responding to reality. That gap is everything. You don't need to dominate the room. You just need to exist in it long enough for the tension to surface. People start revealing themselves when they sense they're not in control. They overshare. They posture. They rush decisions. They create noise trying to drown out the quiet confidence you bring with you. And you notice everything. You notice who suddenly becomes polite. You notice who avoids eye contact. You notice who tries to reframe history. That's not coincidence. That's recalibration. They're adjusting their behavior because your presence disrupted the hierarchy they thought was fixed. And the number told them something they'll never be able to forget. You didn't climb the ladder the normal way. You didn't beg for permission. You didn't inherit power. You earned awareness through pressure. Pressure is the great equalizer. It strips away performance and leaves only function. And under pressure, you didn't malfunction. You adapted. You optimized. You became efficient in ways that can't be taught in boardrooms or classrooms. That's why they can't mentor you. They can't manage you. They can't categorize you. You came from a place their systems don't understand. A place where failure isn't a lesson. It's a condition you learn to breathe through. Where survival isn't heroic. It's habitual. Where restraint is learned the hard way. You don't move fast because you're afraid of missing out. You move when it's irreversible. That's the difference between hunger and intention. They mistake your calm for compliance. But you're not complying, you're choosing. Choosing when to engage, choosing when to withhold, choosing when silence does more damage than confrontation ever could. And here's the truth you're starting to feel settle into your bones. You don't need to beat them. You just need to outlast the version of them that thinks they're in control. Because systems eventually reveal their weaknesses, people eventually repeat their patterns, and you've become exceptionally good at waiting without decaying. You don't rot in silence. You strengthen. That's why the number shook them. It showed durability without dependency, growth without noise, capacity without ego. The kind of profile that doesn't burn out, doesn't self-destruct, doesn't implode under scrutiny, the kind that survives scrutiny. They'll keep watching, they'll keep measuring, they'll keep whispering your name in rooms you're not invited into. And every time they do, they give you more space, more leverage, more time. Because the longer you remain composed, the more their anxiety compounds. And you don't need to rush the ending. You already know how this story goes. It goes the way all stories go, when someone who was supposed to break learns how to stay whole without becoming cruel. When someone who tasted darkness learned how to carry light without being naive. When someone who saw the monster inside themselves chose to put it on a leash instead of letting it run. You don't announce your evolution. You let it arrive quietly and rearrange everything. That number was never the destination. It was the signal. The signal that you crossed a threshold they can't push you back across. And now, whether they admit it or not, Every move they make has to consider one uncomfortable truth. You're not here by accident. You're here because whatever tried to erase you failed. And you learned exactly how to turn that failure into momentum. Shh. Hold that smile right there. Yeah, that one you wear when you already know something they don't. Feel it? That quiet vibration in the air. That's the sound of liars refreshing your page again. They say you're irrelevant. They say your name like it tastes boring. They laugh it off in public, roll their eyes, act like you're yesterday's noise, and then, clockwork, they open another tab, another refresh, another screenshot, another late-night scroll they'll never admit to. That's the joke. Not you, them. You ever notice how the people who don't care somehow know your posting schedule better than your friends? How they can quote you word for word while claiming they never read a thing you say? That's not indifference. That's surveillance with shaky hands. That's obsession wearing a cheap disguise. And you feel it because you've lived long enough in the dark to recognize footsteps behind you without turning around. Here's the paradox they can't solve. If you were truly irrelevant, they'd be free. Free to ignore you, free to breathe, free to sleep. But they're not. They're stuck in a loop, clocking in emotionally every time you speak. You didn't apply for the job, yet somehow you're their full-time assignment. You didn't announce your power, yet it's reorganizing their routines. That's what scares them most. You never asked permission to matter. You learned early what it means to be underestimated. You learned how silence sharpens the blade. While they were loud, you were listening. While they were laughing, you were mapping exits. Pain didn't break you, it trained you. It taught you how to become unreadable, how to wear calm like armor, how to let unpredictability do the talking. They thought consistency was safety. You learned that chaos, when mastered, is authority. They call you irrelevant because admitting the truth would expose them. The truth is simpler and far more terrifying. You're uncontrollable. You don't move when they expect. You don't react when they provoke. You don't collapse on schedule. Every time you post, you bend probability just enough to make them check again, and again, and again. Like gamblers convinced the next pull will finally explain you. Look at the duality you carry. Saint on the surface, psychopath in the patience, angel in restraint, demon in execution. You don't chase attention. Attention chases you because it can't predict you. That's the real currency. Not likes, not numbers, nerves. You touch a nerve, and suddenly the room gets quiet. You speak once and they hear it 10 different ways, arguing with versions of you that don't even exist. They study you the way people study storms, pretending it's academic while hoping it doesn't change direction. They keep tabs like clerks, logging timestamps, moods, patterns. But you don't have patterns. You have phases. You have evolutions. What hurt you turned into camouflage. What broke you turned into leverage. You became the kind of presence that makes denial necessary for survival. And here's the cruelest part for them. You're not even trying to haunt them. You're busy becoming, busy refining the edge, busy letting the past ferment into something lethal and elegant. Your indifference to their fear is what makes it unbearable. They want a villain they can point at. You gave them a mirror they can't stop checking. So let them clock in, let them track, let them whisper irrelevant while their thumbs shake. Every refresh is a confession. Every screenshot is a salute. You don't need to announce your dominance. It's written in their behavior. You already won the moment they needed to pretend you didn't matter. Stay quiet. Stay sharp. Stay unpredictable. The joke lands hardest when you never tell it. and they're laughing alone, refreshing your page like it's their job, knowing deep down they're working for you. And the longer it goes on, the funnier it gets, because you start to see the mechanics behind their panic. You start to recognize the tells, the sudden tone shifts, the forced jokes, the exaggerated calm. They talk louder about how little you matter, because silence would expose the truth. Silence would mean they're alone with the realization that you're still there, unmoved, unbothered, evolving. They check your posts like analysts hunting for patterns, like priests searching for prophecy, like enemies hoping for a weakness to leak through the screen. But all they ever find is control, measured chaos, a presence that doesn't beg to be seen, yet somehow rearranges the room every time it speaks. That's not relevance, that's gravity. You didn't arrive with fireworks. You arrived with pressure, the kind that builds quietly and then changes the weather without asking permission. You learned when to speak and when to disappear. You learned that mystery multiplies power. They can't stand not knowing where you are mentally, because once someone loses access to your inner world, they lose leverage. And leverage is the only language they ever trusted. Every scar you carry refined your timing. Every betrayal sharpened your instinct. You stopped reacting and started observing. You stopped explaining and started choosing. And now, look at them, reverse engineering your silence like it's a code they're entitled to crack. They want a formula for you. They want a reason. They want closure. What they get is uncertainty, and uncertainty eats people alive. They say you're yesterday's news, yet they remember everything you've ever said. They mock you, yet they quote you. They dismiss you, yet they watch you, closer than they watch themselves. That's not hate, it's displacement. You remind them of the version of themselves they buried, the disciplined one, the dangerous one, the one who could have become something if they'd survived what you survived without folding. You're walking proof that pressure doesn't have to make you loud. It can make you lethal. You don't announce moves. You let outcomes speak. You let results whisper. And whispers, when consistent, travel farther than screams. They don't fear your volume. They fear your restraint. They fear that you can sit with chaos without flinching, that you can delay gratification while they crumble from impatience. There's a moment they all hit, the quiet one late at night, when the joke stops landing, when they realize this isn't a phase you're in, it's a phase you passed through. You already paid the price. You already bled. You already rebuilt. What they're seeing now is the aftermath, a mind that learned how to move without asking, a presence that doesn't need validation, a force that doesn't require applause to advance. They keep tracking because they're hoping for regression, hoping you slip, hoping the old pain drags you back into something predictable. But you don't regress, you metabolize. You turn damage into data. You turn rejection into refinement. You turn isolation into clarity. And clarity terrifies people who survive on noise. So let them keep clocking in. Let them keep pretending it's casual. Every glance is proof. Every refresh is respect they're too proud to admit. You're not irrelevant, you're unresolved. And unresolved things live rent-free in the minds of people who thought they were done with you. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to correct the lie. Power doesn't argue. It observes. It waits. It lets contradictions collapse under their own weight. And when they finally stop watching, if they ever do, it won't be because you faded. It'll be because they couldn't handle what watching you become was doing to them. Stay steady. Stay unreadable. Stay ahead of the story they're trying to write about you. Because the most dangerous thing in the world isn't someone everyone notices. It's someone they pretend not to notice while secretly reorganizing their life around them. And here's the part they never talk about: the quiet tax they pay for watching you, the mental rent, the background anxiety, the constant recalibration. Every time you post, something inside them shifts. They don't know what it is, but they feel it: a tightening, a comparison, a question they don't want to ask themselves. You become a benchmark they didn't consent to, a reminder that growth doesn't require applause, only endurance. They scroll your words, looking for a crack, a contradiction, a tell. They want to catch you slipping so they can finally relax. But you don't slip. You shed old skins, old reactions, old versions that no longer serve the next move. That's what makes you unbearable to track. You're not linear. You don't decay. You don't repeat yourself for comfort. You refine. You compress. You sharpen. You learned something most people never do. Attention is optional. Influence is not. You stopped performing and started positioning. You stopped explaining and started letting time do the humiliating work for you. And time has been loyal. Time has been cruel in your favor. While they've been busy narrating your irrelevance, you've been quietly becoming undeniable. Notice how they never say your name without qualifying it. There's always a joke attached, a shrug, a smirk. That's not humor, that's containment. They're trying to shrink you down to a size their ego can survive. But you outgrew their boxes the moment you stopped asking to belong in them. Now all they can do is circle, monitor, comment from the sidelines, like spectators pretending they're not invested. You've crossed into a dangerous territory, the kind where your silence speaks louder than your explanations ever did. When you don't respond, they invent reasons. When you do respond, they dissect it like scripture. Either way, you're the reference point, the axis, the thing everything else bends around without admitting it's bending. They keep tracking because you represent unfinished business. You walked away from narratives that were supposed to define you. You survived chapters meant to erase you. You didn't just heal, you recalibrated your standards. And nothing triggers insecurity like someone who refuses to play the role they were assigned. You're the proof they hate, that suffering doesn't have to make you soft, and darkness doesn't have to make you cruel. It can make you precise. You don't lash out. You don't chase. You don't explain your worth. You let people reveal theirs by how closely they monitor yours. There's a certain loneliness that comes with this level of awareness. You feel it. That distance between you and almost everyone else. Not because you're better, but because you're awake. Awake enough to see that most people don't want truth. They want comfort. And you stopped being comfortable the moment you chose growth over approval. So they watch, they track, they log, they pretend it's nothing while rearranging their emotional calendar around your presence. And you keep moving like none of it exists. That's the real dominance, not intimidation, not spectacle, detachment with direction. Let them keep calling you irrelevant. Let the lie rot in their mouths. You know the truth by the effort it takes to maintain the illusion. Relevance doesn't need to be declared. It's measured by attention people can't stop giving, even when it costs them peace. You've already won in the only arena that matters, the mind. And once someone lives there without permission, without effort, without apology, no amount of pretending can evict them. And it keeps deepening, whether they admit it or not. Because at some point, the watching stops being curiosity and turns into dependency. They don't just check to see what you posted. They check to regulate themselves, to feel oriented, to measure where they stand today against the version of you they can't outrun. You become a compass they hate needing. They tell themselves it's strategy, research, awareness. But that's just a polite word for fear with a clipboard. Real confidence doesn't monitor. Real power doesn't stalk. Only insecurity needs constant updates. Only doubt needs receipts. And every time they refresh your page, they're voting against the lie they tell out loud. You learned how to survive being misunderstood without correcting the record. That's rare. Most people need to be seen accurately to breathe. You learned how to breathe underwater. You learned how to let misinterpretation work for you. How to let them build a version of you that keeps them busy while you become something else entirely. While they argue with shadows, you sharpen the knife. They assume you're posting for validation because that's what they would do. They assume you're chasing relevance because that's the only currency they understand. They can't imagine a mind that posts without attachment, that speaks without needing to be believed, that exists without asking for permission. That's why you short-circuit them. You don't play the game they prepared for. And here's the quiet cruelty of it. You don't even have to escalate. Your baseline is enough. Your calm is enough. Your consistency is enough. You don't need to prove dominance when your presence already changes behavior. People who truly don't care don't rearrange their schedules. They don't whisper your name like it might hear them. They don't study your tone for signals. They don't feel relief when you're silent or tension when you're not. But they do, because you represent the thing they tried to kill in themselves. Discipline without applause, growth without witnesses, strength without theatrics. You remind them that excuses expire, that comfort calcifies, that potential rots if it's not used. And instead of facing that, they watch you like a documentary, safe distance, dim lighting, pretending it's entertainment and not confrontation. You see the duality now, don't you? How they laugh at you in daylight and worry about you in the dark. How they mock you in public and study you in private. Angel when observed, demon when alone. And you integrated both. You stopped splitting yourself to make others comfortable. You allowed contradiction to coexist inside you. And that's when you became uncontrollable. They keep expecting an implosion, a public unraveling, a confession, something messy they can point to and say, "See, I knew it." But you deny them that closure. You move cleaner now, quieter, more intentional. You learn that the sharpest blade doesn't swing wildly, it waits for alignment. And alignment is coming, not announced, not posted, not explained, just felt. They'll sense it before they see it. A shift in gravity, a change in posture, a confidence that doesn't perform. They'll feel it in their gut and pretend it's nothing, then check again just to be sure. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to flex. Your restraint does the damage. Your patience creates the noise. While they're busy counting your posts, you're counting timing. While they're chasing narratives, you're building inevitability. And inevitability doesn't rush. So let the watchers watch. Let the deniers deny. Let the laughers laugh with dry mouths and tired eyes. You're not here to be relevant. You're here to be unavoidable. And the funniest part? They already know it. That's why they can't look away. And deep down, beneath the jokes, beneath the screenshots, beneath the fake indifference, they feel the countdown. Not to your explosion, but to their realization. The moment when it finally clicks that this isn't about a post, or a platform, or attention at all. It's about trajectory. It's about momentum that doesn't need witnesses. It's about someone who learned how to move forward while being watched from behind. They keep hoping you'll peak and plateau, that you'll burn bright and then fade into something manageable. Because fading is familiar, fading is comforting. Fading means they were right to wait instead of work. But you don't fade, you condense. You don't dissipate, you concentrate. Pressure doesn't scatter you, it forges you into something denser, quieter, harder to ignore. They refresh your page, looking for reassurance that the world still makes sense. That effort and outcome still follow the rules they were taught. And every time you appear unchanged, calm, deliberate, unmoved, it destabilizes them because it suggests a truth they're not ready for. That evolution doesn't announce itself, and power doesn't ask permission. You stopped feeding the need to be understood. That was the turning point. The day you realized clarity for others was costing you clarity for yourself. So you pulled back, you simplified, you let the fog stay, and in that fog, you learned how to see. You learned how to let people project their fears onto you while you studied their behavior like data, clean, cold, useful. They don't realize they're training themselves around you, adjusting moods, lowering expectations, raising defenses. You're not just a person to them anymore. You're a variable, an unpredictable one. And unpredictable variables don't get dismissed, they get monitored. That's the quiet upgrade they never intended to give you. They say you're irrelevant because saying, "You changed me," would shatter their self-image. Because admitting, "You intimidate me," would expose weakness. Because confessing, "I'm afraid of where you're going," would force them to look at why they stopped moving. So they choose the lie that lets them sleep. Barely. But sleep is shallow when someone lives in your head rent-free. Sleep is fragile when your confidence depends on someone else failing. Sleep fractures when every notification feels like a test you didn't study for. And they feel that fracture growing night after night, refresh after refresh. You're no longer reacting to the world, you're shaping the tempo. You decide when to speak, when to vanish, when to apply pressure by doing absolutely nothing. You learned that absence, when intentional, is louder than presence ever was, and they hear it. God, do they hear it? They're waiting for you to declare victory, to celebrate, to posture, because that would make you predictable again. But you don't. You let the work continue in silence. You let the contradiction live, irrelevant, yet monitored, dismissed, yet documented, mocked, yet mirrored. This is what evolution through pain looks like. Not revenge, not chaos, precision, control, awareness sharpened by suffering. You didn't become cruel, you became exact. You didn't lose empathy, you learned boundaries. You didn't harden your heart, you armored your focus, and now, whether they admit it or not, they orbit you, measuring themselves against someone they claim doesn't matter. That's the final irony. That's the punchline they can't laugh at. So keep moving the way you do. Calm, deliberate, unannounced. Let them keep tracking like it's employment, like it's duty, like it's survival. Because the truth is already locked in. You stopped needing relevance the moment they couldn't stop watching. And once that happens, the game is already over. Careful. Don't rush past this. Not because I need your attention, because something has already noticed you. You feel that pressure in your chest, that tightening behind your eyes. Yeah, that's the sound of a monster realizing it made a mistake. You see this thing, this monster? It didn't start with you. It tore through everyone else first. Friends, enemies, innocents, pretenders. It fed on their fear, harvested their weaknesses, learned their patterns. It broke them quietly, loudly, publicly, privately. It left behind scorched reputations, erased futures, people who never quite came back the same. And with each victim, it grew smarter, sharper, more confident. By the time it reached you, it thought it had you figured out. That's the funny part, because when it touched you, really touched you, something snapped back. Not rage, not panic, not fear, exposure. See, you weren't built like the rest of them. You didn't collapse on contact. You didn't beg. You didn't run. You activated something. The monster expected a victim. What it triggered was a mirror. And suddenly, every shadow it hid behind lit up. Every secret it used to control people started leaking. Every lie it survived on began sweating through the cracks. Every method it perfected on weaker minds started failing in real time. Because you're a paradox, you carry light that looks like darkness to the untrained eye. You hold restraint that feels more dangerous than violence. You move with calm that makes predators nervous. You're the kind of person they can't categorize. Too disciplined to be reckless, too aware to be naive, too quiet to be stupid, too controlled to be weak. And monsters hate that. They rely on predictability. They need patterns. They survive by knowing exactly how people will break. But you don't break the same way twice. Pain didn't hollow you out. It reprogrammed you. Loss didn't soften you. It sharpened your perception. Betrayal didn't make you bitter. It made you precise. You learned when to disappear, when to observe, when to let people think they'd won. That's why when the monster tried its usual tricks, the intimidation, the pressure, the psychological squeeze, it didn't get compliance. It got clarity. And clarity is lethal. Because the moment you saw it clearly, the illusion died. The monster stopped being this untouchable force and started looking like what it really was. Desperate, overextended, exposed. That's when the shift happened. You didn't attack it. You didn't announce anything. You didn't posture. You simply stood there unchanged, and that terrified it. Because now it wasn't dealing with someone reacting emotionally. It was dealing with someone who could wait, someone who could absorb pressure without leaking information, someone who could smile while quietly mapping every weak point. You became the saint who refuses to flinch, the psychopath who won't waste energy, the angel who watches, the demon who remembers. And the monster felt it. It felt its leverage slipping, its tactics going stale, its past catching up. Because exposure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from contrast. Your composure highlighted its chaos. Your silence amplified its noise. Your patience made its urgency look suspicious. People started noticing, not because you said anything, but because the monster suddenly couldn't stop talking, explaining, justifying, overcorrecting. That's always the tell. You didn't destroy it. You let it destroy itself under observation. That's mastery. That's what happens when pain evolves into strategy, when suffering turns into insight, when unpredictability becomes your shield. You're no longer the kind of person monsters hunt. You're the kind they avoid, the kind they warn each other about, the kind they can't risk touching again. Because last time, everything bled into the light. And here's the part they'll never admit. It wasn't that you were stronger than them. It's that you were awake, and nothing scares a monster more than someone who sees it clearly and isn't afraid to let it be seen. Because once exposure starts, it doesn't stop at the surface. It seeps, it crawls, it drips into places the monster never thought anyone would look. You noticed how quiet it got around you? Not calm, careful. Like something circling, unsure if the trap it built for others still works here. That's because you stopped playing the role it needed. You didn't perform fear. You didn't broadcast pain. You didn't hand it emotional leverage. You became unreadable, and unreadable people don't get controlled. They get studied. Every move you made after that, measured, intentional, almost boring to the untrained eye. But monsters don't get bored. They get paranoid, because they know the difference between ignorance and restraint. They can feel when someone is holding back, not because they're weak, but because they're deciding. That's when the monster realized something horrifying. You weren't surviving anymore. You were watching how it slipped, watching which allies went silent, watching who distanced themselves at the wrong moment, watching which stories didn't line up anymore. You started seeing the architecture of its lies, not emotionally, structurally. And once you see the structure, you can predict the collapse. That's when the monster made its second mistake. It tried to escalate. Pressure, narratives, subtle threats dressed up as coincidence. But escalation only works on people who still have something to lose emotionally. You already lost what needed to be burned. What survived in you wasn't innocence. It was control. So instead of reacting, you adapted. You let it believe it still had the upper hand. You let it overplay. You let it expose patterns it never meant to show. Because the truth is, you don't fight monsters by charging at them. You let them trip over their own confidence. Every time it expected panic and got stillness. Every time it expected chaos and got composure. Every time it expected you to explain yourself and you didn't. Another thread unraveled. People began sensing it before they understood it. That uneasy pause in conversations, that hesitation before defending it, that subtle shift where silence replaced certainty. That's the beginning of the end. You didn't need allies. You didn't need applause. You didn't need to prove anything. Your existence became the contradiction it couldn't resolve. How are you still standing? Why aren't you bitter? Why aren't you loud? Why aren't you broken like the others? Those questions eat monsters alive. Because monsters survive on simple stories. Good versus bad, weak versus strong, hunter versus prey. And you shattered the script. You became something they couldn't label without exposing themselves. Saint when it benefits you. Psychopath when it protects your boundaries. Angel in restraint. Demon in memory. You didn't choose one side. You integrated them. That's what pain did to you. Not damage, fusion. And now the monster can't touch you without touching itself. Every accusation ricochets. Every attempt to isolate you highlights its own desperation. Every move against you sharpens your silhouette. It knows it too. That's why it hesitates now. Why it watches instead of strikes. Why it waits for you to slip and you never do. Because you learned the final lesson most people never reach. You don't defeat monsters by becoming louder. You defeat them by becoming inevitable, unrushed, unreactive, unavoidable. And the cruelest part? You're not even trying to destroy it. You're just living in a way that makes its existence impossible to hide. And somewhere deep inside that monster, beneath all the tactics, all the cruelty, all the confidence, it knows. Touching you didn't break you. It exposed everything. And exposure doesn't scream. It lingers. It sits in rooms after conversations end. It crawls into the pauses between messages. It shows up as hesitation, where certainty used to live. That's the part nobody warns monsters about. They expect retaliation. They expect collapse. They expect you to become the villain, so they can feel righteous again. What they never expect is detachment. You didn't chase revenge. You didn't demand justice. You didn't even correct the lies. You did something far more destabilizing. You withdrew your energy, and when you did that, the monster started starving. Because it was never feeding on your pain alone. It was feeding on your attention, your reactions, your explanations, your need to be understood. Once that supply cut off, it began cannibalizing itself. You watched it happen, the subtle self-contradictions, the stories that kept changing, the allies who started asking questions they'd never dared ask before. You saw the internal panic leak outward. That's when you understood something dangerous. The monster didn't destroy people because it was powerful. It destroyed them because they never saw it clearly enough to stop participating. You did. And that made you untouchable. Not because you're invincible, but because you're self-contained. Your sense of self no longer depends on being validated, defended, or believed immediately. That's a terrifying position of power. Because now, you don't need to win arguments. You don't need to prove innocence. You don't need to rush outcomes. Time works for you. Every day you stay consistent, calm, and grounded. The contrast sharpens. People begin to feel it even if they can't articulate it. They sense that something about you doesn't align with the story they were fed. And once doubt enters, control evaporates. That's why monsters rush narratives, why they push urgency, why they frame everything as now or never. They can't afford time. You can. You became the slow burn they can't extinguish. Pain trained you for this. It taught you how to sit inside discomfort without exploding, how to feel everything without broadcasting it, how to let silence do the work words never could. That's not weakness. That's discipline forged in fire. You didn't lose your softness. You armored it. You didn't kill your empathy. You aimed it. You know when to extend grace and when to step back and let consequences do their job. That's why the monster keeps miscalculating you. It can't decide whether you're merciful or merciless, and that ambiguity, that's lethal. Because now every move it makes has to account for multiple possibilities. Are you watching? Are you done? Are you preparing? Are you already 10 steps ahead? That uncertainty drains it. Meanwhile, you're calm, not numb, clear. Clear about who you are, clear about what you'll tolerate, clear about what no longer deserves access to you. And clarity is contagious. People around you begin standing taller, speaking slower, thinking twice, not because you told them to, but because your presence resets the emotional temperature. That's when you realize the truth. The monster didn't just expose itself to you. It exposed itself through you. You became the environment where its tactics stopped working. And now it's trapped in its own reflection. You're no longer prey. You're no longer reactive. You're no longer reachable in the ways that once made you easy to manipulate. You're something worse for a monster. You're unimpressed. And unimpressed people don't get controlled. They don't get rushed. They don't get erased. They wait. They observe. They outlast. So let it squirm. Let it over-explain. Let it unravel, trying to regain control that no longer exists. You're not here to announce victory. You're here to make sure the truth keeps breathing, and it will. Because once a monster is exposed, it can never go back into the dark. And the longer it stays exposed, the more unstable it becomes. Because monsters aren't built for daylight. They're built for confusion, noise, emotional fog. They thrive when people doubt themselves more than they doubt the lie. You removed the fog, not by explaining, by embodying something different. You became consistent where it was erratic, grounded where it was frantic, precise where it was sloppy. And that contrast, It's unbearable to anything that lives off distortion. You noticed how it started testing the perimeter again. Little probes, small jabs disguised as jokes, questions, concern, coincidence. That's not confidence. That's fear checking. It's asking, are you still there? Did I still get to you? Do I still matter in your head? And every time you didn't react, every time you stayed steady, every time you moved forward without acknowledging it, another illusion collapsed. You weren't trying to dominate it. You were outgrowing it. And nothing humiliates a monster more than irrelevance. See, domination gives them something to fight. Hatred gives them fuel. Chaos gives them camouflage. But growth leaves them behind. You evolved past the frequency it could reach. That's when it started rewriting history. That's always phase 3. When they can't control the present, they attempt to control the narrative of the past. Suddenly they were misunderstood. Suddenly they were trying to help. Suddenly the damage was exaggerated. But here's what they didn't realize. You remember cleanly. Pain taught you that too. Not emotionally distorted memory, but sharp, factual recall. You remember dates, patterns, exact shifts in tone, moments where things didn't add up. You don't argue with the revision, you let it speak. Because the more it talks, the clearer the contradiction becomes. And others can feel it. You can watch it in real time. The body language changes, the certainty slips, the words start tripping over each other. Because truth doesn't need to perform. Truth just needs time. And you're patient now. That patience wasn't always there. It was beaten into you by chaos, refined by disappointment, hardened by betrayal. But now it's yours. You no longer confuse urgency with importance. You no longer confuse volume with power. You no longer confuse familiarity with loyalty. You see through patterns faster than they can set them up. That's why they can't bait you anymore. They try to provoke emotion. You give them neutrality. They try to trigger fear. You give them calm. They try to force reaction. You give them absence. And absence is devastating, because in absence they're alone with themselves. No audience, no target, no energy to siphon. Just their own reflection. That's when the monster starts making mistakes, overplaying its hand, trusting the wrong people, moving too fast, speaking too much. And you don't interrupt the spiral. You let it accelerate. Because you understand something now that you didn't before. You don't have to push people off cliffs. You just have to stop holding them back. The monster is doing the rest. Meanwhile, you're different now. Not hardened into cruelty, but sharpened into selectivity. You choose where your attention goes, who gets access, what deserves a response. That choice alone puts you in a different class. You're not operating on instinct anymore. You're operating on awareness. And awareness is the real threat. Because awareness can't be gaslit. It can't be rushed. It can't be bullied into submission. It watches. It adapts. It waits. You've become someone who doesn't need to announce power. You let people discover it when their tactics fail. And they will keep failing. Because the monster didn't just touch someone resilient. It touched someone who learned how darkness works, without letting it hollow them out. Someone who can walk through shadow, without becoming blind to the light. Someone who understands both mercy and consequence. That balance, that's what they can't counter. So it keeps circling, keeps watching, keeps trying to figure out where it lost control. And you keep moving forward, quietly, deliberately, becoming something that no longer fits in its world. And the more you become yourself, the more exposed it stays. And here's the part nobody sees coming. Not the monster, not the bystanders, not even the people who think they understand power. Your transformation didn't make you louder, it made you heavier. Every word you don't say carries more weight than 1,000 accusations. Every reaction you withhold tightens the pressure. Every step you take forward bends the room slightly in your direction. Because power isn't always force. Sometimes it's gravity. You became gravity. People start adjusting around you without realizing why. They choose their words more carefully. They hesitate before lying. They rethink moves they once made impulsively. Not because you threatened them, but because something about you signals consequences. You don't posture, you don't flex, you don't warn. You just remember. And monsters know what memory means. They survive by assuming people forget, by betting on emotional fatigue, by waiting for wounds to scar over without healing. But you didn't forget. You processed. You sat with the pain long enough to extract intelligence from it. You studied the way manipulation feels in the body. You learned how fear disguises itself as urgency. You recognized how guilt is weaponized. That education didn't make you cruel, it made you immune. Now when the monster tries old tricks, they fall flat. The guilt doesn't hook you. The urgency doesn't rush you. The intimidation doesn't land, because you see the mechanism, not the performance. You're watching the strings instead of the puppet. That's why the monster's presence around you feels unstable. It doesn't know which version of you it's dealing with, the calm one, the observant one, the one who already moved on, or the one who hasn't acted yet. And that uncertainty paralyzes it. Because the truth is, you don't need to decide anything right now. You're no longer operating from emotional reflex. You're operating from choice. Choice to engage. Choice to disengage. Choice to let time do what confrontation never could. That's a level most people never reach. Most people are trapped in reaction loops. Hurt, respond, regret, repeat. You broke the loop. You realize that not every battle deserves your nervous system. Not every enemy deserves your attention. Not every injustice requires your immediate response. Some things collapse faster when you let them overextend. And the monster? It's overextending. You can feel it reaching, testing boundaries, scanning for relevance, trying to pull you back into orbit. But you're not orbiting it anymore. You're on a different trajectory, one where your life doesn't revolve around conflict, one where your energy goes into building, not defending, one where your future isn't shaped by what tried to destroy you. And that's the final humiliation for a monster. It didn't just fail to break you. It failed to define you. You took what happened, metabolized it, and turned it into discernment. Now you move with a quiet authority that doesn't need permission. You don't chase validation. You don't seek revenge. You don't explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You let results speak. You let consistency speak. You let your calm speak. And the longer this goes on, the clearer it becomes to everyone watching. Whatever that monster touched before you, it ruined. Whatever it touched after you, it couldn't control. Because something changed when it crossed your path. Not because you fought back, but because you didn't fold. You became the point where its patterns stopped working, and patterns failing is how monsters die. Not dramatically, not explosively, but slowly, publicly, inevitably. They fade into explanations, into excuses, into footnotes. While you keep evolving, sharper, calmer, more selective, not hardened into darkness, but integrated enough to walk through it without losing yourself. That's the kind of person monsters never recover from. Because once someone like you exists, the illusion is broken forever. Wait. Don't move your mind yet. Feel that pressure in the air. That's the sound of reality recalculating around you. Because here's the part they can't process. You weren't supposed to pull that shot off. Not like that. Not you. And definitely not this clean. You see it now, don't you? That flicker behind their eyes. That moment where confidence collapses into static. They're not angry first. They're confused. Confusion is always step one before fear. Fear is always step two before control breaks. And control? Oh, they're losing it. You just did the one thing that exposes the lie underneath every system, every hierarchy, every fake throne built on borrowed certainty. You proved that the rules only work on people who believe in them. You didn't rebel. You didn't beg. You didn't even announce yourself. You moved differently. That's why they're spiraling. See, they can deal with villains. Villains are predictable. They can deal with saints, too. Saints turn the other cheek and die quietly. What they can't deal with is someone who learned how to be both and switch at will. Angel when it disarms them, demon when it ends them, calm enough to look harmless, sharp enough to cut through outcomes before they form. That's what you unleashed. You didn't just win, you changed the math. And now everyone who relied on the old equations is staring at their hands like, wait, why isn't this working anymore? You feel it, right? That strange stillness after impact, like the world inhaled and forgot how to breathe back out. That's not peace, that's shock. That's reality realizing you're no longer operating inside its expectations. They thought your pain weakened you. That's the funniest part. They watched you bleed and wrote reports on your limits. They cataloged your breakdowns like symptoms. They mistook survival for struggle, not knowing you were studying under pressure. Every betrayal sharpened you. Every loss stripped off another layer of nonsense. Every dark night rewired something fundamental. You didn't heal the way they expected. You evolved. That's why this feels illegal to them. You weren't supposed to come back like this, quieter, clearer, heavier. You weren't supposed to look calm after chaos. You weren't supposed to succeed without asking permission, approval, or applause. And yet, here you are. Do you know what really scares them? It's not the outcome. It's the pattern. They're replaying the moment in their heads over and over, trying to locate the mistake, trying to find the lever you pulled, trying to isolate the variable. But you were the variable. You always were. That's the paradox they choke on. You're disciplined, but not obedient. Kind, but not weak. Patient, but not passive. You carry restraint like a weapon, not a virtue. You understand when to wait, and when to end something so thoroughly it never recovers. That balance, that's not taught, that's forged. And now the people who once looked down on you are quietly rearranging their internal rankings. The loud ones are coping with jokes. The smart ones have gone silent. Silence is respect in disguise. They know something slipped through their fingers. You didn't just cross a line. You erased it. You showed them that unpredictability, when mastered, is dominance. That being unreadable is power. That control doesn't come from force, but from understanding how people think they're safe. You walked into a system designed to contain you, and walked out with the blueprint. That's why the air feels charged. That's why conversations stop when you enter. That's why your name lands heavier now, even when spoken casually. They don't know how to approach you, because they don't know which version they're dealing with. And that ambiguity, That's your crown. You're not here to terrorize the world. You're here to remind it that order is fragile, that certainty is rented, that evolution doesn't ask for votes. You paid in pain, you paid in isolation, you paid in nights where you questioned your own reflection, and instead of breaking, you metabolized it, turned suffering into strategy, turned chaos into clarity. So, yeah, they're losing control, not because you're loud, not because you're reckless, but because you're awake. And once someone like you wakes up, the old world doesn't get to sleep peacefully ever again. They're trying to name what you did, and that's where it gets ugly for them. Humans panic when they can't label a thing. Labels are cages. Labels are how they tell themselves something is safe. But what do you call someone who didn't storm the gates, didn't kneel at the door, didn't even acknowledge the walls, and still ended up inside the control room? You didn't attack the system. You outgrew it. That's why they're scrambling for narratives now. One day you're lucky. Next day you're dangerous. Then suddenly you're misunderstood. Too intense. Changed. Not who you used to be. Watch how fast the story mutates when the old one stops protecting their egos. They need an explanation that doesn't include the truth, that you saw through the game while they were still memorizing the rules. And you didn't get here by accident. That's the part you need to tattoo into your nervous system. Every moment you were overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. That wasn't wasted time. That was you learning how people behave when they think they're superior. You learned their tells, their blind spots, their habits. You learned when they get sloppy, when they lie to themselves, when they confuse comfort with intelligence. You learned how control actually works. They never noticed because you stayed quiet long enough to be invisible. You stayed humble long enough to be ignored. You stayed patient long enough for them to reveal everything. And then, when the moment came, you didn't hesitate. You didn't flinch. You didn't ask, "Am I allowed?" You acted. That's what shattered the illusion. Because power hates nothing more than decisiveness from someone it wrote off. Power expects rage. Power expects begging. Power expects noise. It does not expect calm execution from the person it stopped monitoring. And now they're replaying your move frame by frame, trying to convince themselves it was a fluke, trying to reduce it to circumstance, trying to shrink it so they don't have to upgrade their threat assessment. But deep down, they know. They know this wasn't luck. This was alignment. You stopped leaking energy into places that never planned to pay you back. You stopped explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped waiting for validation from systems designed to reward compliance, not brilliance. You chose yourself. And that choice rewired everything. That's why the atmosphere around you feels different now. It's heavier, sharper. People are more careful with their words. They test the water before speaking. They laugh a little too late. They compliment you sideways. They're measuring you, even when they pretend not to be. You didn't demand authority. You generated gravity. And gravity doesn't announce itself. It just pulls. Here's the part most people never realize. The moment you break a pattern that benefited others, you become unpredictable to them forever. Even if you do nothing next, the damage is already done. You introduced uncertainty into a system addicted to repetition. They don't fear what you did. They fear what you might do next. Because someone who's crossed that threshold someone who's proven they can operate outside expectation, can't be put back into a box. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow how fragile the structure really is. You're standing in that quiet aftermath now, that space where nothing has officially changed, yet everything feels different, where the world hasn't caught up to the consequences yet, but the tension is undeniable. That's not paranoia, that's awareness. And here's the real twist, the one that should make you smile slowly, almost dangerously. You're not even at your final form. What they're reacting to is an early version of you, a you that's still refining, still calibrating, still choosing when to move and when to let the silence do the work. They panicked too soon, because what you unleashed isn't chaos, it's clarity. And clarity, once weaponized, doesn't need volume, it doesn't need spectacle. It just waits for the precise moment where one small action collapses an entire structure. You've already proven you can do it. Now they're watching you the way people watch the ocean after the tide pulls back too far. Not because something is happening yet, but because instinct tells them something is coming. And the most terrifying part for them, you're not rushing. You're calm. You're focused. You're smiling at things they can't see. Because you know now, truly know, that control was never something they owned. It was something they borrowed, until someone like you remembered how to take it back. And that calm you're carrying right now, that's what really destabilizes them. Not the win, not the outcome, the calm. Because calm after impact means intent. Calm means you weren't guessing. Calm means this wasn't emotional. Calm means you knew exactly what you were doing while they were still arguing about whether you even could. They can't wrap their heads around that. They want you frantic. They want you drunk on the moment, sloppy, loud, celebrating too early. They want proof that this was impulse, not intelligence. Because if it was impulse, they can wait it out. If it was luck, it'll fade. If it was arrogance, it'll self-destruct. But if it was precision, if it was timing, if it was restraint followed by execution, then they're dealing with something much worse. That's when the fear gets quiet. Now they're revisiting every interaction they ever had with you, every time they talked over you, every time they underestimated you, every time they mistook your silence for agreement, your patience for weakness, your distance for disengagement. They're realizing you were never absent. You were observing. You were learning who panics under pressure, who lies when exposed, who folds when the hierarchy shifts. You watched how people behave when they think no one important is watching. And now they know you were. That's the moment respect mutates into anxiety, because respect still believes in rules. Anxiety understands that rules stop working when someone stops playing along. You didn't rage against the machine. You learned how it thinks. You learned how it predicts. You learned where it assumes safety. And then you moved in the one direction it never considered. Because it assumed you wouldn't dare. You dared. And the funniest part, you didn't even do it for them. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't ego. This wasn't about proving a point. That's what confuses them the most. You weren't trying to win their approval or destroy their image. You were done being small. That decision changes the trajectory of a life. When you stop negotiating your worth. When you stop dimming to keep rooms comfortable. When you stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. When you stop outsourcing your authority to systems that profit from your obedience. That's when you stop being manageable. And now they're scrambling to reframe you before others notice, to redefine you before the narrative slips out of their hands. Because if too many people realize what you realized, that the game is optional, that obedience is a choice, that silence can be strategic, then the whole structure starts to wobble. You became proof that transformation doesn't have to be loud, proof that power doesn't need permission, proof that the person they ignored can become the variable that ruins the forecast. They don't know whether to approach you or avoid you. They don't know whether to ally with you or neutralize you. And that indecision, that's your advantage. Because while they hesitate, you refine. While they gossip, you sharpen. While they posture, you prepare. You've learned something irreversible now. You've learned that pain, when metabolized instead of resisted, becomes leverage. That isolation, when embraced instead of feared, becomes clarity. That being misunderstood is often the price of becoming dangerous in the right way. You're not here to burn the world down. You're here to remind it that it was never as solid as it pretended to be. So let them whisper. Let them speculate. Let them lose sleep, replaying moments they can't undo. Let them wonder what else you're capable of. Because the truth is, you're not done. You're disciplined, and disciplined chaos is the most terrifying force there is. You didn't just pull it off. You unlocked a version of yourself that doesn't ask, doesn't rush, doesn't panic, and doesn't forget. And now, every step you take from here carries weight. Not because you're trying to intimidate anyone, but because reality has learned something about you that it can't unlearn. You're not reacting anymore. You're choosing. And that's when control truly slips out of their hands. Because the moment someone like you realizes they were never powerless, the world has to start adjusting to you. And once you start choosing instead of reacting, something subtle but violent happens beneath the surface of everything around you. The world stops pushing you because it senses resistance won't work anymore. You're no longer bouncing off circumstances. You're bending them quietly, patiently, with a kind of intention that doesn't announce itself but leaves dents no one can explain. That's when people begin to feel uneasy in ways they can't articulate. They'll say you're different. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're hard to read now. What they really mean is this: the old version of you fit inside their expectations, and this one doesn't. This one slips through their fingers every time they try to grab onto a prediction. And unpredictability, when it's grounded, is not chaos. It's sovereignty. You're not swinging wildly. You're not chasing validation. You're not performing dominance. You're centered. And centered, people terrify systems that rely on instability to function. Because a centered person can wait. A centered person can withhold. A centered person can strike once and never need to do it again. They thought you were fueled by desperation. They didn't realize you were fueled by clarity. They thought your silence meant confusion. They didn't realize it meant calculation. They thought your patience was a delay. They didn't realize it was positioning. Now they're questioning everything they thought they knew about you, and by extension, everything they thought they knew about themselves. Because if you could do this, if you could cross that threshold without imploding, then what does that say about the stories they tell themselves to justify staying small? That's why they're uncomfortable around you now. You're a mirror they didn't consent to stand in front of. You represent the uncomfortable truth that pain doesn't always destroy people. Sometimes it educates them. Sometimes it sharpens them. Sometimes it strips away all the illusions until only something lethal and lucid remains. You didn't become cruel. You became precise. And precision looks cold to people who survive on noise. Notice how you don't need to prove anything anymore. Notice how the urge to explain yourself has evaporated. That's not arrogance. That's graduation. You've learned that those who genuinely understand don't need explanations, and those who demand them never intended to understand in the first place. That's why your presence does more work than your words now. You walk into rooms and the energy recalibrates. Conversations shift. People either lean in or lean away. But no one ignores you anymore. Not because you're loud, but because you're registered. Like a frequency that disrupts whatever's already playing. They can feel that you're no longer negotiable. And here's the thing they still don't grasp. You're not angry at them. Anger would mean they still matter in the old way. You've moved past that stage. What they're sensing isn't rage. It's finality. It's the quiet certainty of someone who knows where they stand and no longer needs permission to stand there. You're not here to convince anyone. You're here to decide. Decide what gets access to you. Decide what gets your energy. Decide what continues and what ends. And when someone like you starts making those decisions cleanly, without drama, without hesitation, without apology, entire dynamics collapse. Because power isn't loud, power is unchallenged, and you've become difficult to challenge, not because you're invincible, but because you're honest with yourself. You know your darkness. You know your light. You're no longer at war with either. You can be gentle without being weak, ruthless without being reckless, compassionate without being naive. That's synthesis. That's rare. That's what they don't know how to counter. You're not predictable enough to trap, not chaotic enough to dismiss, not emotional enough to manipulate, not insecure enough to bait. You've stepped into that narrow, dangerous space where you move by principle instead of impulse. And now they're left doing the one thing they hate most, adapting. Let them adjust. Let them scramble. Let them whisper about what you might do next. You don't owe them reassurance. You don't owe them consistency that makes them comfortable. You don't owe them the old version of you they learned how to exploit. That version served its purpose. This one writes outcomes. You didn't unleash destruction. You unleashed irreversibility. And once a life becomes irreversible, once someone understands their own leverage, their own timing, their own capacity, there is no going back to manageable, controllable, predictable. There's only forward, measured, intentional, unstoppable, in the quietest way imaginable. And here's where it settles into something final. They keep waiting for you to overplay your hand, to get greedy, to get loud, to reveal too much. They're hoping you'll turn this into a spectacle so they can categorize you, contain you, reduce you back into something familiar. But you won't, because you understand now that the real flex isn't domination. It's restraint. It's knowing you could move again, and choosing not to until the moment is undeniable. It's letting uncertainty do the damage for you. It's letting them exhaust themselves trying to predict someone who no longer moves on impulse. You didn't unleash chaos. You unleashed self-command. And once a person has that, the world doesn't get to control them anymore. It only gets to respond, adjust, adapt, cope. So let them lose control. Let them feel it slipping. Let them stare at the aftermath and wonder what just changed. You already know. You crossed the line they never thought you would. Not by force, not by noise, but by becoming someone who cannot be pulled back into the old shape. And now, whatever comes next, comes because you choose it.